Tennis Takeaways. I'm Dewey Evans, a tennis evangelist here in Austin, Texas, and I'm here with my co-host Lisa Stone. Hi, Lisa.
Good morning, Dewey. I'm Lisa Stone, creator of Parenting Aces, a program for tennis parents who are just trying to figure out this whole junior and college tennis journey. I'm based in Orange County, California, in the town of San Clemente. And Dewey, the US Open is over. I am exhausted. It was my first major being on the left coast. And I have to say, watching tennis when it comes on starting at 8 a.m. is awesome. I have really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's got to be a really different experience where those late night matches that honestly I didn't watch. Now at 58 years old, I don't always stay up to watch the ones that don't have marquee value, so to speak. But being
Yeah.
on the 2 hours difference, I think I would have caught a lot more than what I caught. So uh, tell me a little bit about what you might have seen that I missed.
I mean, I didn't stay up. Well, I didn't stay up. I didn't watch all the night matches. Again, it was a crazy 2 weeks. And because of COVID, and typically I would have been in New York covering the Junior Open, but this year the Junior Open didn't happen. And so I didn't have media credentials and was not on site. And as such, was not privy to a lot of the media information that I typically would have. And so it was a different experience for me this year. There were a few players that I was following, notably the former college players for sure, and the former top junior players from the U.S. I was keeping an eye on, and it was a fun tournament. And I have to say, from my perspective, I found myself watching a lot more of the women's matches this year than I've done in past years. And I don't know what to attribute that to other than the fact that I found the women's draw really intriguing.
But do you think that it was that the marquee players weren't there as much on the men's side, or was it possibly now that your son is a little bit further past being done with tennis, so you're not attached to it personally, or was it some other thing? Do you just find that the women's tennis is more appealing?
I just found the stories on the women's side more interesting this year. And I'm not going to say the M word because I think we've had so much of the M word over the past 2 weeks with the women's draw. And yes, it's awesome that there were so many moms in the draw.
You
Yay,
said
moms.
it.
And I said it, but that's it. But it was more for me. I am intrigued by Naomi Osaka, and I have been intrigued by her for a while, but during the Western and Southern, when she decided to take a stand and join with her fellow athletes across the various sports and say, "Hey, I'm going to take a day away from my sport to bring more awareness, to honor people we have lost due to the different injustices happening in our country right now." She plays under the Japanese flag, but that was a step that an American athlete took, in my opinion. And we know she grew up in Florida. She's now living in LA. And yes, she plays for Japan, but Naomi Osaka identifies very strongly with what's going on in the US right now in terms of racial injustice, in terms of, everything happening around COVID. She's a young woman who has her finger on the pulse and seems to be very driven by this notion of making the world a better place for everyone. And I love that about her. So I was very intrigued with her.
I'm going to take a quick little stab at some of where that might have come from with her, because she uses the name Osaka, but Osaka is in no way, shape, or form a family name. It's a function of what it is within the Japanese culture, and if she had taken her dad's name, then that would have been frowned upon, and she wouldn't have been accepted within the culture. So Osaka is actually where she was born. So it's a place. It's a name that she took on because, or was given to her by, her family because of needing to fit in. And some of the, Japan is not the most racially tolerant society which exists in the world at the moment. Let's call it what it is.
Or culturally diverse,
Right,
right?
right.
I mean,
Um,
yeah,
so, she has in her entire life had to struggle with the fact that, a good part of her and a good part of how she looks, right, that she can't run away from, says, I'm not like the others. And that's on both sides because she has oriental
yeah.
features and she has very dark complexion and hair, which is, what we would refer to as not the good hair. Um, so, she
Now, now.
uh, no, so that's something. So I guess that's one of those things that only certain people can say, right? Within the black community, it's always been one of those things of, oh, you have the good hair, because there are very few in the black community who are pure of race, and so most of us inherited some physical features, characteristics
Yeah,
of whatever we were blended with. And in a lot of cases, that is Native American, which is generally
right.
very straight hair, right? So get that little bit of wave, but not the kink. And so it was what was referred to as that good hair. Um, so
I read an
I probably have that.
article. I read an article about Naomi's hair compared with, and I in kind of the vein of me trying to open my mind and educate myself on cultures and ways of life outside what I grew up with. It's always very interesting to me to read articles about Black women and their hair and the importance of hair in Black female culture, and I guess Black male culture too. But the articles that I've read and the documentaries I've seen have been really focused on the women. And I mean, just this last week, there was an article, I forget where I read it, about why Naomi is appealing to Black culture so much and how much of that has to do with the way she wears her hair when she's in public and competing. And that was, another learning point for me. So, I think that all kind of feeds into my intrigue with her. Is I feel like she's teaching me personally a lot about Black culture, about Black athlete culture, about her age group and that culture, which kind of leads into what
Yeah,
we
but
were
so all
gonna.
of this, not like all of this was without controversy,
Right.
because after winning the
Until,
trophy, everything was good. And
yeah,
I didn't even see this till a couple of days later because I don't spend as much time following pop culture. But
right.
her significant other, I guess she refers to it as her boyfriend,
Yeah.
and she took a
They
picture
just
on
bought a
center
house
court.
together. Yeah, they just bought a
Mhm.
house together in LA. So yeah, I would say, yeah,
So there's this picture that you can see at this point in time of her holding the U.S. Open trophy and him, flipping the bird to those. And apparently there was no one else there. This was after all the ceremony things had all been broken down, and
right.
they were taking the opportunity to be out on the court and to do some things. But it's been interesting to see how the tennis community, at least the U.S. tennis community, which is what I see online the most, has
Yeah,
responded to that photo. And I know you've had conversations and discussions with
yeah.
probably people that are more our age, as well as some that are younger and culturally diverse. And what's your take, and how has that been shaped by the conversations that you've had?
So first of all, let me just say that that photo appeared on Corday, her boyfriend's Twitter feed. It was not anywhere on Naomi's feed. It was a photo that he posted on his feed. And I who knows what conversation went on between the two of them after it went up and the controversy kind of hit over it. We don't know. Did she say to him, I wish you hadn't posted that? Or, we don't know what her response was to that. But I will say, as you alluded to, Dewey, the response by especially our age group and the white community mainly was outrage. And I will say my initial response was, why would they do that? Like, it's so disrespectful. Like, fool around, do what you want, but not with the trophy and not on center court. And it just was, to me, it felt disrespectful. I wasn't offended, by the middle finger gesture as much as I was just kind of disappointed by the fact that they didn't respect the moment and the accomplishment enough. So that was where I started, right? That was my initial reaction to the photo. Then I went on Facebook and I start reading all of this complete outrage over it, and mostly posted by white 40 and 50-year-old, 60-year-olds,
Yep.
Who grew up as I did with the notion that when you put your middle finger up, it is a gesture of offense, and it's threatening, and it's not something that nice people do, right? It's offensive. Then I started seeing some comments and posts by people of color who were offended also by the photo. And so then I started kind of asking some questions like, is this, well, and let me back up a bit. People were saying things like, what is she doing with that thug? It was that kind of commentary, which I have come to understand is very offensive. It's often racially driven to use the word thug when referring to young Black males that very rarely are young white males referred to with the term thug. And so that started getting me really uncomfortable about the language I was seeing. And so I made a phone call to someone who we've had on this show, actually, who is significantly younger than you and I, but is a brown-skinned male. And I said, I need you to talk to me about this photo and the response that I'm seeing online, because it's making me really, really uncomfortable and angry. I have stopped engaging in those conversations on Facebook, but what he explained to me was the middle finger sideways is not what you and I grew up with as shooting somebody the bird. It doesn't have the same meaning and significance in the younger generation as it does in our generation. And it was just them goofing around. It probably, and this is all a guess because I haven't interviewed Corday and nobody I've read commenting on this has interviewed him. So we don't know really what he intended, but mostly it was, he was excited. His girlfriend just won this huge event. He's never really been around the tennis world so much. So, he wasn't doing it to be offensive. It was more like, this is a pose and it's kind of cool and I'm going to stick it on my Twitter feed. I don't know. What's your take, Dewey?
I've been counter to a lot of the tennis community for most of my life. I've spent, and
Yes.
sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. But I'm somebody who has looked at all of the coaches around me, and I've been in the junior tennis world more than anything else. And then coaches,
Right.
I consistently hear them say, this new generation, and look what's going on, and they're going to hell in a handbasket. And when I never did. And I was different because when I was that age, I did everything you will see and more. I was not anybody who should have been a role model or that I look at. But it was youthful exuberance. It was living life to the fullest. It was about, I don't really care what other people think. And I know now, as a 58-year-old, I wouldn't do any of that. I probably wouldn't have done any of it at 30 years old when I decided that I was moving from home 1,200 miles away because I wanted to be a role model. I recognized that the things I had done through my late teen years and my 20s were not the kinds of things that were going to endear me to people's parents. So I decided that I was going to go somewhere and do something else. But at 22, 23, 25 years old, had I been in that situation, I probably would have walked into the situation with a chip on my shoulder, felt like we overcame, and therefore I'm going to snub my nose at everybody because of it. And that would have just been being expressive, and it wouldn't have been something that I probably would have looked back on and said anything other than, wow, look who I was. Like, I was a jerk when I was younger. But we mature past that. And I think as we
Yeah.
grow into the people we are at this middle part of life, we fail to remember the things that we did that were, that we might not do now. I immediately looked at the picture and I saw the people's comments and I immediately thought about the Ed Sullivan Show and how they wouldn't show Elvis from the waist down
Oh,
because that was just so bad. And the Beatles coming on, and that, there was this whole generation that was going to ruin because of rock and roll music. And
yeah,
they did okay, right? I think there are a
right,
lot of people that now point to them as the greatest generation, those that
right,
sacrificed for the country, went to Korea, went to Vietnam, the not the end baby boomers. I think I'm the last, next to the last year of baby boomers. My sister,
yeah,
who's 2 years younger, is not a baby boomer, and I am. So, we're at the very end of it. But I think, these kids are going to be okay. They're just
right.
kids. We look at them and they're at the absolute pin, or she is at the pinnacle of a sport which we've seen dominated by people who are very much older at this point in time. The Roger Federers and Serena Williams, and Venus Williams, is 40 years old, and
Yeah,
we think, well, that's what they should be. No, this is just a kid. It's just been a long time since we've seen, Michael Chang winning a slam at,
right.
17 years old, or Pete Sampras at 19, or Martina Hingis at whatever she was, 16. These are just young people.
Right. How often do you say to yourself, thank God I didn't have social media when I was a kid?
Yeah, because we know me, who took the selfie of having a heart attack and taking it off my bucket list. That I definitely would have been blowing up social media when I was that
Yeah.
age with all of the stupid things that I was
Yeah.
doing. Um,
Yeah.
and which is
Yeah. Me too.
interesting because we talk about the cancel culture, and I've had that discussion on something else that I do with people, and to what standard should people be held for posting pictures, and should people not be allowed into colleges and things because of it, and so these young people, and making them aware that while you may delete it from your social media, it will exist someplace on the
Yeah.
internet for forever, right?
Forever. Right.
And
But
I don't know.
also, I have to say, because my son is now in the music industry too, there is a side to musicians that is all about the branding, right? And Corday he's a musician. And how much of this had to do with his branding of who he is as a musician rather than who he is as a human being. And, if you go on his Twitter and you read the comments under the photo, I mean, it fits his brand as a musical artist. And his fans were all about that photo. They thought it was great. And the fact that he posted it on his own social media account that is his branded, you
Mhm.
know, social media, to me says a lot. because I will say that, my son posts stuff on his branded social media, and sometimes I go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But it's in keeping with who he is in his role as a musician. And so I've learned to just kind of, who he is as a human being and who he is as a musician could be two different things.
Yeah. I think it's good we're having these conversations. I want to talk about the tennis for a second, because
Oh,
I saw
what?
a couple of things. On the women's side, the tennis was pretty compelling at the end of the tournament. I didn't see a
Yeah.
lot at the beginning, but the tennis was at a pretty high level. On the men's side, the men's final reminded me of a junior match, that it was
Oh my
watching people
gosh.
get as tight as a
Painful.
drum, that Zverev not being able to get a serve over the net was just incredible to watch. We've been blessed for however long that we've been watching the big four, or the big three plus Andy Murray, and I guess it might be the big five, because I would say that Stan has been as good as Murray over the course
Yeah.
of his career. And so we've watched these people have these amazing abilities to maintain their composure on the biggest stages and the biggest moments and play some incredible tennis. But what I think we witnessed in the men's final is what most of us have all experienced, of taking peek at the finish line and not being able to compete, that choking away leads and feeling like, oh no, this is never going to be the same. The emotions that we saw coming from Sasha Zverev in the post-match, the trophy ceremony of the men's, was as genuine as I think we can really see. There was nothing scripted. There was no PR people around. There was him being really sad because he felt like he was all by himself, and his parents had contracted COVID and they couldn't be there, and that he had let them down in some way. And I think that we had a wide world of sports moment, right? That we're old enough
And
that
we
we
have to
watched.
remember, I mean, he's 23 years old, right? He's
Yeah.
a kid. I mean, both these guys, well, I mean, Team's a little bit older now. And by the way, shameless plug, I am interviewing Dominic Team's dad, Wolfgang, on Saturday morning on the Parenting Aces Facebook page. So I hope people will tune in for that. It should be pretty interesting. But that aside, I
Make sure
agree
you
with
tune in,
you.
people. Make sure you tune in. It's going to be that it might have been a shameless plug, but one well worth having. I don't
Yeah.
know anybody else who has this interview, so check it out.
Yeah. Thank you. But getting back to these two guys, I agree with you. I think it was such a picture of the human level of the sport, and how even two guys at the highest level still, that emotion comes in, that stress comes in, seeing the finish line, trying so hard to get there, understanding the opportunity with Federer, Nadal not in the tournament, Djokovic being booted out of the tournament, and one of them has this opportunity, and who's going to be able to hang on long enough to grab, the trophy at the end. It was really something to watch. And what really struck me also, and again, this goes back to Naomi Osaka too, and my kind of, I won't call it an obsession, but I fangirl a little bit around her. It's this whole notion of compassion for your opponent, and the fact that these two guys at the end of the match did their bro handshake and, hugged, and were each so complimentary of the other and of the other's whole team, which I thought was really cool. And I say that about Osaka too, because I just remembering her match with Coco last summer, and how she comforted Coco at the end of that match when Coco was so upset for not showing her best maybe. And I think this is something hopefully that we're going to continue to see in our sport, is this camaraderie and this compassion and respect for the opponent. And I love seeing that. And it's something that has been missing in the junior tennis world for a long time too. something that maybe we don't teach as much as we used to, but the whole notion of having respect for the person on the other side of the net and understanding how they're feeling when they come out not the winner.
Yeah, well, and I
So
would say also the authenticity. The handlers have for a long time scripted how people are supposed to respond and not to say anything that is politically incorrect. And what we've gotten is a bunch of bland personalities, and what we're beginning to see is people being authentic. And so that's where people attach to it, because reality
yeah,
is we all know what it feels like to be mad, sad, and glad. And so when somebody lets out those emotions, we tend to attach to them more than this very stoic, what you think of as Bjorn Borg and Chris Everett for those of our generation. There's not a lot of passion there. Where we tend to remember the Jimmy Connors and Aaliyah Nastasis and John McEnroes of the world who jump out there and let it all hang out and be those people, the Andre Agassi and the flair and the bandana and the denim shorts and all of
yeah,
those types of things. Those are the things that we remember and that draw people to our sport.
right.
And I like the fact that we saw some more genuine authenticity coming from players. And I guess that even includes what the photo of Naomi Osaka and her boyfriend. I'm not a huge fan of the photo or what he did. So, while you've used his name, I choose not to. But if people want to go find him out, that it's out there. It's pretty easy to figure out who he is. And if you want to follow him, that's great. Because that's truly, if that's the brand and that's the people that he wants to follow him, he deserves to make a living too. So, follow him.
Yeah, there you go. All
I think we chewed
right.
up our time. Um,
Don't we always?
wow.
Can I just give a shout out to producer Kim for our new graphic this week, and to you, Dewey, for the inspiration behind it. So thank y'all for that, and hopefully you viewers enjoy seeing our stuff, listening to our stuff, and hopefully you'll like the new graphic. We'd love to hear from you. If you have comments, if you have ideas for future shows, if there are guests you'd like to see, topics you'd like us to address, please reach out to us. You can always email me, lisa@parentingaces.com, or dewey@deweyevans@gmail.com. We're here for you. The show is for y'all. We're not doing it for us. We want to put this information out to help all of you do a better job in your role, whether it's as coach, as parent, as player, as fan. We're just here to provide the information for you. Dewey, it's been a pleasure. You look great. This
It's
post heart attack stuff is agreeing with you, whatever that is. So I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it.
I was thinking about it, and the second of next month will be 6 months, half a year since I had the
Wow.
heart attack. This is something that gets me up and gets me to look forward to what's coming ahead. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone who took time out of your day to watch this episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. See you soon.